Hey everybody, it's SavageLandsnews coming in this time with Ben Dodd, Uzuri extraordinaire, who cracked Uzuri so hard that it got top 8 in the only competition we've had since Outsiders came out. And not only did he crack it, he put it on the internet before Outsiders was released. This guy is a deck building genius, playing one of the new heroes that's really close to me. Yeah, say hi to everybody here.
Hello, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, pleasure is all mine, man. Uzuri's looking really sick in this meta. I love the way she plays, and as soon as I saw that list, I immediately took it to my armory event and had way too much fun. So you can find Ben on the Big Flesh and Blood Discord. His name is Dodd, and I'll put that in the description below. But before we jump into Uzuri and that list and all of that, how long have you been playing Flesh and Blood?
Not long, actually. I started playing towards the end of Uprising,
Okay.
and kind of then Dynasty came out like a couple months into when I started.
Wow. So not very long at all, yeah. Man. That's like recent. Yeah. Who'd you play in the Uprising meta?
So I started learning the game with Fi because I was like,
yep.
I'm just going to take the aggro deck. It's the best place to start. Teach me some fundamentals. Then once Dynasty came out, I was like, all right, I know how to play now. I need to start building decks.
Okay.
So I was like, I'm going to pick a build around card from Dynasty and I'm going to make a deck. And I saw Rock and I just tried to make Rock work for like months.
If you would have cracked Rock, oh my God, it would be that'd be the sickest thing in the world. It's so close to being acceptable. So close.
Yeah.
So you played Ragnar for a bit there.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it shows. You're pretty cool. So of course you played Ragnar, right?
Yeah.
And how'd you get into Flesh and Blood, right? Like, did you play any other TCGs or how'd you jump into it?
So yeah, I learned to play Magic the Gathering when I was 6 years old with my brothers, and loved that. Played that for years and years, and then eventually kind of decided, damn, I miss drafting. I miss Magic the Gathering. I missed all the good vibes. Saw Flesh and Blood, and I was like, oh, you know what? I'll give this a crack.
Yeah.
I learned the rules. I was like, there's no board state. This game fucking sucks.
Yeah.
How do you play? What? No board. You just draw, play your hand. This is terrible. And then I was like, no, all right, I'll give it a shot. I'll see what it's about. And then once I started playing it, I was like, just fell in love immediately. It's an incredible game. It's so much fun to play.
It really is. I never played other TCGs. So it's like my first impression was it felt like a fighting game. And I really liked that feeling of like the give and take, hitting each other kind of with blows and the back and forth and the bluffing,
The sense of momentum is really interesting to have a card game where it feels like movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's so many like small lines and like the bluffing aspects and like all of that kind of stuff, like small amounts of value. I don't know. It's like you said, it feels like the game's moving forward, but it doesn't have a board state unless I guess you're Prism or Dromai, right? But it somehow does feel like it's moving forward even without that consistent board state, right? That's crazy. So what's your test process like? Because you said you tried to crack Rock, and I think I saw you in the Discord a couple times, right? Talking about Rock and your Rock deck, and I was excited to see where you went with it. But what's your testing process like?
Obviously, the start of it is just all theory. You just have to have an idea and like, okay, I'm going to try and make this work this way. Then I think you want to start by committing fully to the idea you're testing and then work back to kind of back towards a normal deck, back towards standard. And yeah, my testing, quite a lot of it is online just because it's the easiest way to get an opponent. Mm-hmm. And when you're starting to test a deck, the quality of your opponent is less important because you kind of just need to play the deck and lose to itself a bunch. And once it starts getting better and you're like, oh, this deck's actually kind of good now, then you need to go into more focused testing with, okay, I'm going to sit down with someone who I know is good and they're going to beat me.
So you start with like an extreme, right? Like you're going all the way to the edge, and then you kind of like pull it back over time. Is basically you take an idea, go to 100, and maybe go back down to like 50% over time. Is kind of how you would say you do it.
Yeah, and that's kind of following the basic advice of, if you're testing a card, put in 3 of it, because if it's good, it's good, and then you can feel like, oh, 3's a bit too much, and you cut down to 2, and then you go, oh, 2 actually feels good. Whether if you put in 1 copy of a card, you only draw it like once every second game, and it's hard to tell whether or not it's good in the deck.
Yeah, that makes sense. What was your like testing process with Uzuri? Because you really cracked that thing, like, you cracked it before it even came out, right? I saw your list in the Discord posted in like March 12th or something like that. So what was your process with that?
I mean, that was grinding on Talishar. With the cards bugged out, not even working at that point. There were some cards that it's like, oh, I can't put this in the deck yet because it doesn't work, but I'm just going to put in this card and imagine when I draw it, if drawing the other card would be good.
Oh, I see. Interesting. That's hard to do.
But yeah, I just grinded shitloads on Talishar.
Okay.
But as I said, with the going fully is, you notice the deck only plays 5 blues.
Yes.
When I saw Uzuri, I read the hero power, and what that read to me was, you don't need to pitch. And pitching cards is a waste of a card.
Yeah.
If you don't have to pitch, you shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
It's inefficient.
That's
so
good logic.
I was like, okay, I'm just going to make a deck, and it's just going to be 80 red cards, because that's what Uzuri. It's like, I'm going to try and go a 100, just, I don't need blues because I can swap all my red cards for my other red cards. Cool. So I just went full red, and I was like, let's see how much of a disaster this is. And it was pretty good.
I was surprised when I ran your list. I was genuinely surprised. I have so many questions that we're going to get into later, but it blew my mind because I would have started with like mostly blues,
And then obviously over time it's been pulled back, and there's a couple blues and some good yellows, and Codex.
Codex. Codex is a whole discussion in itself, I guess, sometimes, right? But I mean, how does it feel to see your list top 8ing an event, the first event after Outsiders launched, like the very first event, your list is in the top 8, right? How does that feel?
Oh, that was amazing. I was basically sitting there all day just by my phone waiting for Sam Dando, Drip Drop, as he's known, to message me after his games, and he's like, "Oh, I won," and I'm like, "Yes!" And then he's like, "Oh, I'm 5-0." I'm like, "Oh, yes!" No. Shout out to him, absolute legend. Obviously, piloting it is half the battle.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really grateful to him for trusting me and trusting my list, and he also put in work, refining it with me, and really, really glad we could do it.
It's incredible.
I'm super stoked that Uzuri made top 8. I can't wait to see more Uzuri. Maybe Pro Tour. Hopefully we'll see some people.
Well, hopefully, man. She's really cool. What was your, so, I mean, you guys were communicating at this point, right, during the event. Like, so what was your testing process with her? And like, at what point did, you guys kind of come together to work on this deck?
So I was on Telshar, and I was asking for specific matchups because, on Telshar you get lots of random things. So it's important that it's just like, okay, I need to play 10 games versus Oldham. I need to play 10 games versus Iceland. I need to play 10 games versus Briar, just so I can, focus, see what the matchup's like. And I was asked for Briar. He was testing Briar for the Brawl. Briar was the deck he was taking to the Brawl. And I beat his Briar deck with Uzuri. And he was like,
what is
this? Shit. You're I'm quite a good Briar player. Like, I think that was a fluke. I think you high rolled me. And then I beat him again.
Oh my goodness.
And then I beat his friend who was playing Dromai. And then he was like, I need this list.
That's nuts. I had no, I assumed you guys were friends. I assumed something like that. You guys met on Talishar?
Yeah, no, we just met on
Bro,
Talishar. I gave him my Discord, and then we started working on the deck from that day onward. And then he was like, "I'm taking Uzuri to this tournament,"
that
and
is
we've been.
sick. I had
It
no
was really
idea
cool.
that's how that worked. That's such a sick origin story. Oh my! And you beat Dromai. Let me tell you guys, that's not easy. Especially like a high level Dromai player into Uzuri is not. It's not an easy matchup.
It's not fun. It's not
No,
fun. It's well, it
no.
is fun, but it's tough. That's
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
hard. I'm not good enough at Azuri yet to beat Dromai's, let alone at a pro level. So, that's amazing. That's incredible. I can't believe it. That's such a cool origin story. Like, it's getting me pumped. I can't wait to talk to you some more. I love Azuri a lot more than I really thought I would. So, before we jump into the deck, right? I can't believe you beat a high level Dromai on Talishar in your first try. But like, what do you think? Where do you think Azuri stands in the current meta?
I see Uzuri as Azalea, but better as far as matchup spread. So she's very similar to Azalea in great versus aggro, tough matchup versus Dromai, occasionally doable, which is the same problem Azalea has. But Azuri's better versus Oldhim. Azuri's better versus Azalea than Azalea is versus Azalea.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
the mirror, right?
Yeah.
If we're looking at the matchup spread, like the mirror there is better. And yeah, so I think Uzuri is a very different deck to Azalea,
Yeah.
very different style. But as far as position in the meta, I think they're one and the same, but Azuri's better, which is a big call because
That's a
everyone thinks
bold
Azalea
statement,
is
but
good.
I'm here for the ride, man. I mean, obviously, a zero list, like a 0.0 list that runs into an event like that and hits top 8 on the first try, you're on to something, right? You're on to something. I mean, maybe not a 0.0 list, but the breakout list always ends up getting a little bit innovated upon. So it's like this is the first version cracking a major event immediately. So I believe you.
I also think it's like, how many Azaleas entered the Brawl
That's true. There's a lot.
and 2 made top 8 because, it's a good deck.
Yeah.
And like there were not many Azuris there, and there was only one Uzuri on this list, and they made top 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is, I think if half the field was on Uzuri, there would have been a lot more Azuris in top 8.
All right, so let's jump right into the list because I have 1.5 million questions. I'm super pumped, but let's jump right into it. All right, we have the list right in front of us. He's going to run us through all of his decision-making points, and I will put this link in the description below so you guys can go ahead and give it a test, ruin his win-loss ratios on Talishar, and we can all have a great time, take it to your armories, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, you want to run us through your equipment choices? I think it's pretty explanatory, but you want to run us through it?
Yeah, sounds good. So here's the main equipments is Black Tech, just very solid, 1 armor, and go again. We're not trying to recur this. Occasionally you'll recur it, and that's wonderful. But it's not the plan.
Okay.
Crown of Providence is just the best generic head piece.
Yeah.
Because we're not on a contract-based assassin list, we're not going from the mask.
Okay.
Flick Knives. This card overperformed. When I saw it, I was like, seems all right, I guess. But this thing is really good. Much stronger than it looks. The flexibility is very powerful. And with Nerve Scalpel forcing through an on-hit, it makes it so hard to play around Uzuri. And, I mean, you're a brute player. You know how good Reckless Swing is.
Yes, I do.
2 damage late game. Very hard to block.
Yep. It's the similarities between them are like, it's not exact, but it gives me a lot of that same vibe, right? Like, on hits or trying to do on hits, 2 for 6s. And then this card, I don't know why I love it so much, but I love it way too much, like way too much. It's so strong.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. Flick Knives is really good. Tunic. Tunic's a bit weird in this list because the core game plan does not involve pitching a card. Your average turn is no resources spent. That's the plan. Which means your resource off Tunic has less places to go. So don't be surprised if your Tunic's sitting there for like 6 turns.
Okay.
Because you're just playing 0 swap, 0 swap, 0 go again, block, and you just don't have anything to do with it. But this is very powerful because when you do want that one resource, you really want that one resource, and it allows you to do a whole bunch of other stuff like Death Touch.
Yeah. Codex Death Touch, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The self-explanatory Fendals is for Death Touch. That card is cracked.
Nerve Scalpel. This is basically always in because I mean the synergy with Flick Knives is just so good.
Inherent.
Yeah, Nerve Scalpel, great card. And yeah, Spider's Bite. You'll notice later, not running many other knives just for kind of slot reasons because I think other cards are more impactful. Spider's Bite does a lot of work into a lot of matchups, and the matchups where it's not good, you don't really want to be using your daggers anyway because your daggers are not the core game plan of this deck. Okay. Your core turn cycle doesn't involve attacking with a dagger. So they're important and they're good, but they're not the core strategy.
Understood. Yeah, because I was probably even playing it wrong when I was first starting because I was always trying to hit a dagger, right? So I'm very interested to see how this goes. Do you want to jump into the sideboard equipment too while we're at it, or do you want to leave that for the end?
Yeah, we'll do the rest of the equipment now, might as well.
Okay, we got
so there's 4 other pieces of equipment. We have 1 piece of Arcane Barrier for Viserai and Icelander and Kano. You don't bring AB versus Briar because this deck doesn't have the resources to pitch for it. You don't play 2 AB because this deck doesn't have the resources to pitch for it.
That makes sense.
It is redder than the most red aggro deck in the format.
Yeah.
So the 1 Arcane Barrier basically lets you pitch a yellow for 1 Arcane and an Ice from Icelander, or 1 Arcane Barrier is all you need versus Rune Chance.
Got it.
And you can pitch a blue to it anyway.
Okay, that makes sense.
Scale Peeler is just for Oldhim.
Yeah. Okay.
Oldhim is a big deal and takes up quite a lot of our sideboard slots, but it's worth it because you need them.
Yeah. Surprise, Oldhim has not gone anywhere. It's still very prevalent in the meta right now. Snappies?
Snapdragon also for Oldhim. Originally, there's a couple of other uses for them. They're also good into Dash and Dromai. Basically anywhere where you can't guarantee the hit. Okay. These decks that are playing a lot of D-reacts and you want the guaranteed go again. For instance, versus Dromai, Black Text is on hit for player.
Yeah.
So you can't Black Text to get go again when trying to clear dragons. So Snapdragons is useful in that matchup as well.
That makes sense.
But the reason it's in the deck is Oldhim because he can stop your hit. Yeah. You can't guarantee the Black Tech, and you need to go again on certain turns to push through damage. So it's very much worth the slot.
Okay, that makes sense to me so far.
And once again, Oldhim.
Yeah, the guy eats too many sideboard slots for everybody, man.
Yeah. But Vambrace does a lot of work. I thought it wouldn't be good in the deck because there's not many cards to pitch for it. But turns out having a resource sink when you're going to be playing a 26-turn game, it gets the damage through.
Yeah.
You'll often have a spare resource. You get to Tunic every 3 turns and get one through. It's just very good. And it turns your daggers into a card that demands cards from hand rather than nothing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, in those super grindy matchups, right? Like 1 damage every time you play Vambrace, it adds up, right? And turning off Crown is just very nice, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. Should we dive into the list? How do you want to start with this?
So we'll start with the stealths.
Okay.
This is a stealth deck. We play a lot of them.
Yeah.
So 9 isolate. This card is the bread and butter of the deck. Isolate is the best card in Uzuri. Not much to say. Dominate, strong keyword.
So yeah, it's the best keyword she has. Yep.
It blocks 3. Like this thing does everything you want.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Then the rest of your stealths are all red, because isolate's the only one that's worth it to play on the less attacks. Because this deck wants to be, dealing damage with the stealths via nimblism, razors, some of these things we'll get to later, which is, not the take some people took with Uzuri. But if you have infect, I mean, that's 5 damage if it hits, which is very good off one card. And Sedate and Wither both also have on hits that are relevant, depending on the matchup. These can be very important. Usually I'd call them 1 value. But if it's in the right matchup, they can be hugely impactful.
Backstab is just the best of what's left, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so backstab's kind of the worst of them, which is why it's on 2. The main issue with this is when you swap in your new card, they can dereact it unless it's CNC. So it doesn't do as much work as the others. But you need enough in your deck. This deck really wants a stealth every turn, just to open up the play lines. You might not always use it every turn, but you'll feel it in the hands where you don't have one of these cards.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and so you got your stealth package in here, quite a bit of it, right? I mean, Rainbow Isolate makes the most sense to me. It's such a powerful card. So where do you want to work into next?
There's kind of 2 main other sections, which is, so there's all your stealths, and then there's what you want to do with them. Because just playing a 0 for 3 doesn't do much. They just block 3. They have their turn. It's not the plan.
Yeah.
So you have kind of 2 sides of the story. You have the cards you can swap in, and you have the buffs.
Yep.
And you're gonna do one or the other on your turn. So the cards you can swap in, CNC, just nuts.
Busted.
Command and Conquer with Dominate.
Busted.
I mean, Isolate CNC. It's just such a good.
Crazy.
Yeah. Shakedown, similar to CNC, worse versus dereacts, but kind of even better versus aggro.
Yeah, sure.
You just get to pick the best card and take it out of their hand.
Yeah, it's crazy. That on hit's nuts. So strong.
Yeah. And Death Touch.
Yeah.
Has overperformed majorly. This card is on par with the other swaps, which is unimaginable when you start building the deck. But the flexibility of being able to get whatever affliction you need, whether that's frailty, inertia, or blood rot, is, in some matchups, inertia is crucially important versus Oldham versus Icelander, etc. In some matchups, that frailty, stops double Kadachi, stops their mask, getting the chain links longer, and blood rot's just 2. It's a 2-card 8.
Yeah, swing big, but
you can get a 2-card 8 with Dominate off Isolate. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, card's I wish Rhinar had it's like a more flexible swing big, just doesn't block as well.
And the kind of the best bit about Death Touch is that if you don't have Isolate and they get to block 6, when you go for the Shakedown or the CNC, you have to let them, unless you've got some other tricks going on. With Death Touch, you get to Arsenal it, and the 2 costs can be a little clunky in Arsenal.
Yeah.
But Death Touch loves being Arsenal. You just play it next turn off your Tunic that's been ticking up, and then you've got a 1-card 8, unless they block, and it's incredible.
Okay, so we got your stealth cards covered. We got most of your replacement cards covered. Where do you want to go next?
So then there's the buffs. Nimblism, which didn't start in the deck. It doesn't look like much. It looks like a worse Razor's Edge.
Yeah, it does.
Because Razor's Edge blocks one and is a reaction speed.
Mm-hmm.
But Nimblism is better than Razor's Edge in this deck.
Yeah, it blew my mind. I would never have put this in. But when I played it, every time Nimblism showed up, I was like, this is pretty good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's overperformed more than I could have ever hoped. It just is smooth. It works. It enables your hands. It allows you to get, you can get 9 dominate off Nimblism, red isolate, one of your other buff cards. It's super flexible. This can go onto your death touch. It can go onto your leave no witnesses. Yeah. You can Nimblism into Codex, which then lets you buff stack what you're bringing back. It's very flexible in this deck, and you always want 3.
Yeah, I noticed immediately, like, a couple play patterns just showed themselves to me with Nimblism when I tried your deck for the first time. It's like, especially that one you said, like, Nimblism, Codex, leave no witnesses. I was like, this is disgusting. Like,
it's so good.
I just forced you to put a card in your arsenal, and now I'm gonna blow it up. It's so mean.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Okay, so yeah, Nimblism surprised me for sure. Surprised me.
Razor's Edge. This card is just solid. When it's not useful in your hand, when you're wanting to swap in one of your on hits like CNC, you just block 3, and it's fine. But it allows you to go taller with. You can get one of your stealth cards if you need to get an inertia on them. You can swing sedate, Razor's Edge it. You can shred, force through these on hits. It's very solid.
Yeah, it makes sense. 0 for 3 is just like magic. It's pretty good. It's on rate. And then when you're talking about cards that have on hits, like, this is pretty gross. Like, it's pretty gross when you go 3 over and give them a token that they didn't want to hit.
Yeah. And then Spike with Blood Rot there's on 2 of here because this costs 1, so it doesn't fit into your normal turns. But this is 5 damage at reaction speed, which is very powerful. When you have the Tunic up, it's good, and you want some cards in your deck that you can use Tunic with. This card often just blocks 3, but often it's pushing a lot of damage, and it really helps you kind of bring the max amount you can threaten up.
Okay, yeah. I mean, 1 for 5 is above rate.
Yes.
It's definitely above rate. It's pretty far above rate too. It's not even like a little bit. It's like quite a bit above rate. So it makes sense to me. I still have a lot of questions to ask, but we'll get through this, and then I'm going to ask all my questions at the end. So we covered your buff cards. I think we got leave no witnesses, generics left, and Codex. So where do you want to start?
Yeah. So the rest of the cards are kind of support. These are cards that are powerful in assisting your core turn cycle, right? So the basic game plan is you block 2, you play a stealth, and then your opponent cries. Because you have an empty arsenal. So if they block 6, you strip 2 cards with 1, you're ahead on turn cycle, and you arsenal your card for next turn. If they don't block 6, you swap in one of your terrifying on hits, or you buff it up and the stealth hits, and you're good.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The only way they can kind of survive that is D-reacts, but they will run out of D-reacts. You do this every turn.
So why E-Strike and Rabble over any other go again card, like, I don't know, Scar for a Scar, or any of those kind of like staple go again cards?
So Rabble is just very good in this deck because this deck already wants to play so few pitch cards that Ravenous Rabble is basically just a 0 for 4 go again unconditional.
Yeah, basically.
Occasionally you hit a yellow, and then it's a 0 for 3, which is on rate, maybe slightly below rate in constructed.
Yeah.
But you run 3 blues main board. Your
Yeah.
chances of coming in for 2 go again on this are incredibly low, and almost every turn you draw it, and then it just adds 4 damage to your turn, and that brings your turn slightly above the rate it would be at. It's also important to have some sources of go again, some ways to extend your turn, because when you get given more cards, when your opponent has an off turn, you need ways to use your hand, and that's something Assassin struggles with.
Yeah.
So
I noticed that very fast in my deck building because I was trying to take her a different direction, and then like there would be a turn where I just obliterated their arsenal and their hand, and they're stuck, and then they give me this like 4 or 5 card hand, and I was like, dagger, same thing, like it just not having go again did feel bad because when I played your list, it was way more clean on those turns, like rabble swap, right? Like it was just more clean.
Yeah. E-Strike is very good in this deck because it fills a lot of roles. So when you get given that 5 card hand, E-Strike for 5 go again. Now that's below rate, but it's a lot more above rate because you're doing that when it would otherwise be no damage.
Yeah. Yep.
And the rest of the time, this is a 1 card 5. And because your whole deck is red, like every single card in this main deck will happily be arsenaled, and it's on the power level of, like you at the end of your turn, you block 2, and then you E-Strike for 5, draw a card and arsenal it. It's 5 off 1 card, and every single card in this main deck wants to go into arsenal.
I didn't think about that. Okay.
So every time you get that, you get 11 off 3 cards. Very solid. And then you've got your arsenal for next turn. Any of your stealths, any of your buffs, just every card you draw off this is gas.
Yeah, I didn't think about the fact that like the 0 for 5. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like it replaces the card you pitched. So it's basically a 0 for 5 chain ender to some extent. That's interesting. I didn't think about that mode. I was honestly, when I was trying it, I was only really using go again and +2. So I'm going to have to give this another crack.
I would almost never use +2 unless it's the Oldham matchup where you need your cards to push for more damage.
Yeah.
If I'm versing aggro, if I'm versing another deck like Azalea, it's like usually it's go again or draw because the draw is always worth at least 3.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because that's basically, I was basically using it with like Nimbleism for +10, and then otherwise,
you also do that. Because Nimbleism into 10 when you've already got a card in arsenal, E-Strike is just incredibly flexible.
Yeah, it makes
it's
sense.
Just always good.
No, I did. I'm going to give it another shot with the arsenal idea. I did not think about that. That's really interesting.
Leave No Witnesses is too good to not run.
Yeah, card's cracked.
This card busted.
It's so good.
Not much to say about this. It doesn't fit in with your deck's game plan. Like your average turn cycle, you can't buff this with anything other than Nimbleism.
Yeah.
You can't swap this. So it's you don't want, a bunch of other cards like this.
Okay.
But Leave No Witnesses is so good. And in synergy with Codex.
Yep, one of my favorite lines.
It's incredible. Yeah. So there's not much to say about this apart from good card.
Yeah, it's nuts. And then when you do have those matchups, I saw some of your like matchup guides where you put Shred in. This card's very scary with Shred living somewhere in the deck, It's very scary. Okay, so speaking of that, Codex, is there any... Do you want to touch on Codex?
Well, there's nothing to say about Codex, and there's everything to say about Codex.
Crazy. Because
this card's busted. It's incredible. It's your power card. This is, you're a brute player. You know Yellow Majestics well. This is your Blood Rush Bellows.
Yes, basically. If I had this, oh my god, man. If I could just tutor up swing digs all the time, I would be broke. It's so cool.
So this deck is kind of built to utilize Codex the best of any deck.
Okay.
Every card in the main board is happily placed into Arsenal from the Ponder.
Yeah, for sure.
Nimbleism, Death Touch, Leave no witnesses. Assassin just has so much power that it can bring back.
Yeah. There's nothing in here that's bad in Arsenal, except for like maybe Shakedown, but even then it's a must block, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like when Shakedown is your worst card in Arsenal, it's like you wait until you draw a random yellow, you play Shakedown, and then they sit there going, oh my god, do they have Shred? Do I block 6? If I block 0, they can react with their equipment, right? So you have to block it, but then if you block 6, you get shredded. So
yeah, when that
it's still
when this is your worst card, you're feeling pretty good. You know, like, feeling great if that is the worst card that landed in your arsenal. Okay, so now for I still have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna.
Do you want to do questions before we get into the sideboard?
Oh sure. So yeah, let's do that, because I mean, looking at it real quick, yeah, I think my main questions, and I'm sure a lot of people out there have these main questions, right? Is why so little blues, right? Like, I mean, I know that was your initial idea. You don't want to pay for anything. Totally makes sense, but when you have those kind of more exhaustive game plans and you don't have blues in your deck for like dagger, fatigue, you know, how are you surviving? And then especially since surgical is just surgical, right? It's a very, very strong blue, one of the strongest blues probably in the game. So like, you know, have you tested the blues? Have you, you know, what are your ideas?
Yeah. So, you know, the reason this deck doesn't want blues, you know, we've already discussed, you know, it makes Rebel better, it makes Codex better, it makes, you know, Strike better. You don't need to waste your cards attacking for 1 off dagger. You can just block 3 and then still do your turn, and it's still hard for them to block. In the matchups where you know, so for Oldham, where you need blues because, you know, kind of second cycle, you need to start churning through dagger because you're starting to run out of resources, and you need to make sure some powerful turns line up to get over the line, you know, and you can rely on these daggers, Vambrace to chip through.
Okay.
You don't need a deck that's full of blues because you've pitched your blues for second cycle.
Okay.
You know, you only need 5 blues distributed through your deck. You know, you can use them over and over again. So when you're versing fatigue, you don't need a ton of pitch cards. And the more reds in your deck, the more damage in your deck, the more threats in your deck, the more cards you have that are playing to your normal power turns.
Yeah.
So verse fatigue, the fact that my entire deck is reds is good.
Okay.
Your second cycle is powerful. Your third cycle is powerful. The only reason that you need blues, or you would want more blues, is for Wizard.
Yeah.
Kano and Icelander.
Yeah.
Every other deck, you are so happy that your deck is red.
That makes sense.
Kano, we sacrificed. We decided, you know, you versus Kano, you lose. That's fine.
Yeah, sure, fine. It is what it is, right?
I'll take that. I'm not gonna change the entire deck and lose, you know, percentage in every single matchup to have a chance versus Kano. I'm just gonna lose. How Dando beat a Kano at the Brawl, I have no idea.
Yeah.
He beat a Kano. I don't know. Ask him.
Yeah. My buddy's a Kano player, and he actually doesn't like playing into Uzuri even without the blues. Because like, just like you don't get to have an arsenal ever. You know?
Yeah.
That's the hard part. Like you can't just hold on to a wildfire in your arsenal. You kind of have to stumble into it, or you just get beaten down with, you know, inertias and leave no witnesses and CNCs, and yeah, it's very interesting. But I would say, yeah, probably most of the time Kano's probably going to find it before you kill him, you know. Yeah. But what about Icelander? So, that's a high profile deck.
Yes. So with Icelander, you need to save 1 card back to pitch for ice, because you'll attack with a stealth, and then you have Uzuri swap or a attack react.
Yeah. And
they can ice, so you need to hold back 1 card for that. You don't need a ton of resources to save yourself from arcane damage versus Icelander. you know, you're still going to get hit by 8th Ice Vein, and almost every Icelander deck these days is running a decent amount of attacks that you can actually block. If Icelander is the best deck in this meta, and there's a ton of them, maybe you want a couple extra blues and yellows in the sideboard. So yeah, that's kind of the general vibe of like, this is why you only want 5 blues, or maybe 7, maybe 3, you know, but it's any more than 10, far too many for this list.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, another hard part about Uzuri and Arcane is that you have no natural Arcane armor.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you have to sacrifice almost every one of your important slots for any Arcane barrier at all. You're like probably the only class left running 4 Arcane Barrier Null Rune. You know what I mean? That's a lot to give up.
And it's a lot of slots.
Yeah, it's a lot to give up.
So yeah, it's just not worth it, or we found that it wasn't.
Okay.
So then there's the question of why no surgical? It's like, okay, sure, you've got 5 blues in your deck, 3 of them should be surgical, right? Why are you not running surgical? The reason there is that versus aggro, versus the decks that are not planning on blocking me a ton, I don't side in the 2 extra blues. The only blues in the deck are 3 isolate.
Yeah, okay.
Isolate is better than surgical extraction.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
In this deck, it is part of your core gameplay and your core turn cycle. It's a power card that dominates, super important. So it's like, there are 3 blues in this core main deck, and that is isolate. And you don't want to run surgical instead of isolate. Versus the decks that you would want surgical versus, you're not running extra blues. So then the last 2 blue slots, or 3 blue slots, or, you know, however many you're going for, but for us it was 2 extra blues in the sideboard, want to be useful in the matchups where you bring in the extra blues. And for us, that's, you know, Icelander, Dromai, Oldhim, and surgical extraction does nothing versus Oldhim. Shred deals 2 damage late game once you're in 3rd cycle and they're on 6 health left and you're just trying to get them dead. Like, Shred is a tech card for certain matchups, and that's why we're running it over surgical here, because we're only bringing in the extra blues versus certain matchups.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I guess I have 2 more questions for you. So let's see if you can, let's see if you're ready for them. Have you tried experimenting with a lower ratio of stealth cards, but including some of those contract cards that just natively do more damage? Like, they're 0 for 4s compared to the 0 for 3s. Granted, maybe not compared to Blood Rot, but have you experimented with some of the contract like ratios?
We have. That is kind of the enigma with this deck, is this is a 0 for 3 deck, not a 0 for 4 deck.
Yeah.
So many cards in this deck are 0 for 3, and so many cards in this deck are 2 for 6.
Yeah.
Which doesn't look good on paper.
No, it doesn't, right?
Doesn't sound right. 12, how do you beat Fire? How do you beat Oldhim? How do you beat Briar? How do you beat anyone that you're just playing? You block 3 and you attack 3. This doesn't work. But in practice, that's just not how it plays out. And we tried putting in a couple 0 for 4 extra contract cards, but they don't support your core turn cycle, which means a lot of the time you're just blocking with them. And occasionally, you know, you can block out like 2 and then play a 0 for 4 instead, and then arsenal your last card instead. But you would prefer to play a stealth, and even if you don't have a thing that is synergistic with it, even if you're just arsenaling a codex for later and you just attack them for 3 stealth, you are threatening them every turn with a stealth.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, Leave No Witness is powerful enough that we want it. But playing a bunch of other 0 for 4s just means that there's less ways to use your hand, and more of your cards read 0, 0, block 3.
I mean, it makes sense because I tried to do it. I tried to bring this in, like, took your list, kind of made like a hybrid version with a couple of the other cards, increased the blue count. So I basically did everything you said not to do. And I ran it online a bunch of times. And I was like, man, this sucks. Like, what? Why doesn't this work? You know, there's the extreme other side with like a lot of blues and the pummels and that kind of stuff. That one felt pretty okay a lot of the time. But like it didn't feel as good meeting in the middle, anywhere near as good as your deck feels. Like just firsthand experimenting, right? So it makes sense. Everything you're saying makes sense. I just know people are going to ask you.
I think this deck wants to be the Uzuri deck that is playing for like Uzuri's unique thing. And it wants to do what it wants to do. And there's a bunch of cards that are good cards, but they don't support your game plan.
Yeah.
So they don't make the cut.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, everything makes sense. And my final question, only because I got absolutely annihilated by Dromai at my armory, is why don't you run Orbital Class, the NAA dagger, right? Why not just have that one extra card that does help a little bit into, like, you know, Dory, even though I don't think Dory's that bad, but Dory, Dromai, and some heroes like that.
Okay, so Orbital Class is good versus Briar, versus Dromai, versus Icelander, versus Dorinthia. That's kind of, and Kana.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the matchups where you'd like it, hypothetically. Kano, don't care about. We're sacrificing that anyway. Versus Icelander, my resources are never going to daggers. I almost never attack with dagger versus Icelander because I need to pay for my ice that they give me, and the rest I can go into AB. You know, you're pitching a yellow for ice and AB1, you're pitching a blue for ice, AB1, and, you know, maybe you've got one floating that you can do something with or not. But using a dagger on your first attack versus Icelander opens yourself up to dying to Blizzard. It opens yourself up to dying to Channel Lake. It's terrible. So Orbital Class, not good versus Icelander. It does nothing.
Okay.
Versus Dorinthia, Nerve Scalpel already hits all their reactions because that's not just D-reacts. It's attack reacts as well. And versus Dorinthia, you're already favored. Versus Dromai, your daggers are going to be going into their Ash Wings and occasionally like into a 4 health, like into Miragai, and then hit with a 3 stealth to clear it, or into you throw a dagger after you E-strike go again to clear their passing Mirage.
Whoa, wait. Wait, you could do that?
No, sorry, not throw. Sorry, not throw.
Oh,
I mean, attack into it.
I was about to be, my mind was going to be blown. Okay. Perfect. Understood now. Got it.
Yeah. So it's like, you don't really want to attack your opponent with your daggers that much. That's not what this deck is about.
That makes sense.
In the matchups where Orbital Class is wanted, it's not actually useful because you're not attacking them. Like, the only matchup where you're really attacking them with dagger as a consistent game plan is versus Oldham.
Yeah, I mean, your answers are all making perfect. You've clearly thought about this list a lot because your answers are cohesive, they're clear, they have testing background, and you know, you've got like a background in testing each one of these answers. So like you've sold me, man. And I guess that's honestly the only questions I really had left before we jump into the sideboard. You know, maybe like why blood rot, but it's probably just because it's more important to do damage than like give an inertia token, right? That's kind of it, right? Is this card going to stay in your long run testing? Because it's the only one that stood out a little awkward to me.
Blood rot spike is, I've mixed feelings.
Okay. And
when you start playing with it, you're like, oh, cool, this is going to be really good. And then you're like, oh, I just block with this every time I see it. It's never actually good. I should just play a different card. Yeah. But it's also somewhat important. Like, you need more than, so the 3 Nimblism, 3 Razor definitely, and you know, you need a little bit more than that as far as the buffs go. You just ratio wise, you want some more. You know, I would play 5 Nimblism instead of 2 Spike, but you can't, you know, so you need some other ways. And you also, when you go down to the only Tunic outlet being Death Touch, suddenly Tunic doesn't do anything for the whole game. So there's a bit of a, you know, there's some awkward elements that come from it, but Spike does do a lot of work occasionally.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's the best of...
I might play something else in the slot, but I haven't found anything better yet.
Okay. All right. So shall we jump into the sideboard? Because there's some interesting decisions in here, in my opinion.
Yes.
But you wanna run us through the sideboard real fast?
Okay, so the kind of the core, the things that make sense to everyone in the sideboard is we have D-Reacts,
Yep.
3 Fate, 3 Sync, very nice, and 2 That All You Got. The That All You Got is good versus, Fi, Briar, Runeblades, Katsu, which was considered to be, Katsu was looking to be a bit scarier, and there was a lot of people playing Katsu and trying it. Didn't end up being a part of, I think the current meta, he doesn't look to be succeeding.
Yeah.
But we were going into this blind as far as what the meta looked like. And That All You Got is a yellow. So it's good for the matchups you need extra pitch. And it's a D-React for the matchups like versus Dorinthia, versus Uzuri, where you just want a D-React and you don't really care about the text on it.
Yeah.
And it's good versus aggro. So it's flexible, and we wanted a flexible card that was useful in many places. So that's our 7th and 8th D-React, is That All You Got.
Makes sense to me.
Going into a different meta, you can change up your D-Reacts. Maybe now that Azalea is really good, you want to run not Unmovable because we don't have the pitch, but Reinforce the Line.
Yeah.
There's other options that you can play with, but that's what we went with as far as the reacts.
Okay.
And then there's Rainbow Shred.
Yeah.
Shred is incredible. Yep. It is the best react in your deck, but only versus decks who want to block you. So that's why it's in the sideboard, not the main.
Totally makes sense.
So basically versus every single deck that you aren't running the D-Reacts into, you run the Shreds into instead.
Yep. Totally makes sense.
You can stealth, they block, you shred, then you Uzuri swap into CNC.
Yeah.
It does all the work. It does all the work.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, super strong. Kind of nuts.
So that's kind of the, that's the core of the sideboard. It's very simple. We have our D reacts for when we want to block, and we have our attack reacts for when they want to block. Simple but effective. They're all great cards. Then we have cut down to size, which is an extra swap target, which you want in certain matchups. It's good versus any deck that wants to keep a hand.
Yeah.
Which is a surprisingly large number of decks, and it's also good into a open meta.
Yeah.
You could take something way more specific, like a race face, but
Humble.
You don't know if that's going to be relevant. Cut down to size just demands a block.
Okay. That makes sense.
Versus Dromai, the text doesn't matter. It's a popper.
Yep.
Versus Oldhim, the text doesn't matter. It's just for damage. Same as CNC is textless versus Oldhim as well, half the time.
Yeah.
And versus aggro decks, this is shakedown 4 and 5.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And you could probably, you could target the meta. It's the same thing I do on Rhinar, right? Like right now I'm looking at Humble because Humble seems pretty good right now, but it could be basically any 2-cost card that is relevant into the majority of the meta. Okay.
I will say, cut down to size heavily overperformed.
Okay.
It was a lot better than expected. And I would test it yourself before switching to something, because even though Humble does look to be good in this meta, I still prefer cut down. It's ended up being surprisingly strong.
Maybe I should play it in Rhinar. I have been testing Humble, but I haven't been testing cut down.
I think in Rhinar it's a lot worse because with the stealth swap,
it's telegraphed.
They don't know.
Yeah, Humble
cut down's easy to play around.
Yeah, Humble has to have 1 damage hit, whereas cut down they block with anything. It's fine. Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. That was kind of my feeling, but I forget, Uzuri has the illusion of safety at all times. You know what I mean? Okay, that totally makes sense. And then we have one of the strangest choices, in my opinion. I'm sure I saw a lot of people in the Discord asking about this card. I kind of had an idea. I took some guesses with you, but Yellow Rabble.
Okay, so a lot of the concepts in this deck came from me. Obviously, the core concept, been working on it a while. Nimblism, testing out some cards, finding the ones that work. I thought Yellow Rebel was a terrible idea. Sam Dando and some of the people he was working with, they added it to the deck. I had no idea. It's just like, why don't you play Hill? If you want 0 for 3 go again so badly, just play one that actually hits that.
Yeah, why not Hurl, right? Yeah.
However, I was entirely sold on this card after playing with it.
Okay.
Rabble is very good, just, red Rabble is incredibly good in this deck because, there's maybe been some decks historically that are better at using Rabble than this, but as far as like all of the decks I've seen, is no deck is running less blues than this. Maybe Dromai. So Rabble is almost always red. In the great words of Drip Drop Jando, just reveal a red. It's 3 every time. Don't reveal a blue.
Yeah. Rabble works every time until it doesn't, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Just get good. Roll the dice.
Hey man, I can relate with that. Is it, and does it, aside from 3 go again, does it serve like, it serves other purposes, right?
Yes. So that's one half of it. Then you get the upside that it's a yellow pitch, which adds a lot of flexibility, right? When you need extra pitch versus Icelander, you have it. So it's very efficient on sideboard slots. We get more room for other stuff. When you're versing Dromai, you sometimes want to go again to clear their dragon, but when they have an Ashwing, you want a yellow pitch to dagger it. Versus Azalea, they're going to be dominating you. You want go again cards so you can use your hand effectively and not be stranded with the assassin problem.
Yeah.
But versus, other decks, you need the pitch. And versus Oldhim, it's both.
Okay, that makes
sense.
Because
you can pitch it for yellow at the start, dagger around, or you're like, oh, I need to pressure. I don't have other cards with go again. I want to use my full hand, and you can play it. It's flexible, solid.
Yeah. Yellow pitch is really important in those like grindy, longer matchups, right? And then, like you said, it basically always fires for 3, no matter what, almost. And then in like hyper fatigue matchups, you can do the cool Rabble trick where it's like, I'm just going to play 4 Rabbles with no cards left in deck and blow you out,
Yeah.
So, and then Plague Hive. This card's sick. I would run it just for cool factor. But what's it in the deck for?
So this is most powerful versus Oldhim and Icelander, which 2 big decks, 2 scary decks that you want your new brew you're working on to beat. So I was like, that's worth the sideboard slot, even if it's just for those 2. Versus Oldhim, every single one you hit is relevant. You prefer to hit Blood Rot and Inertia. Like if you hit Inertia with this versus Oldhim, it's so good. But Frailty means that when they attack you with the hammer for 4, you can block a 3 card and you don't leak damage. And you do actually need health versus Oldhim. They can kill you. They have a lot of time. They're throwing hammer at you with a spare card a bunch. You don't want to get chipped down. So Frailty's one health at least. But you get to cycle it through. You get to hit a Blood Rot. You get to use it with the daggers, and it can just help get a few free little advantages here and there to get through the wall of defense. Versus Icelander, you needed to save a yellow on your turn to pay for ice and hopefully 1 AB. This lets you do that, and Inertia is hugely relevant versus them, and Blood Rot's 2 damage. So 66% of the time, this is feels amazing versus Icelander.
Yeah, it's just, you're going to pitch anyways. You might as well do something with it, right? That's cool. Yeah. It's also just a sick looking card. And I love rolling dice, so I'm all aboard the Plague Hive train.
And it finds its way into a couple other matchups, like versus Viserai, it blocks 2 versus the Rune Chance, and then gives them a little thing.
Do 2. Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
So finds some other places.
Yeah, that's the whole list, right? Pretty incredible. I think I asked most of the questions I had, right? Do you want to jump into matchups? All right, so real quick here at the end, thanks everybody for hanging on this long. Really, really interesting. Crazy hero. I can't believe you cracked it this fast, and I can't believe its performance so far. But we're going to go ahead and rate the matchups. Good, bad, skill. Okay. And then, there's Uzuri and Riptide are missing from here. So I'm assuming Uzuri is a skill matchup, right? One quick question for the Uzuri matchup. Do you feel your version has an advantage or a disadvantage compared to like the contract or blue pummel version?
The pummel version is bad.
Okay.
Pummel's bad in Uzuri.
Okay.
It's not a good idea. It seems good, but yeah, I don't think Pummel is a good card for Uzuri.
Okay.
The contract version is, I'd say, the contract version is quite powerful in a very different way to this list.
Okay.
And I'd say that's kind of a 50-50 skill-based matchup. You have to side in all your cards because otherwise they can fatigue you too easily. But then you've both got a lot of tricks up your sleeve. You've both got some D-reacts, and it just kind of comes down to how it plays out.
Huh. Okay. What about the other assassin? Where would you put Arachne?
Yeah. The contract Uzuri is basically the same as Arachne. I mean, they play the same game plan with some slightly different card choices. So yeah, Arachne, I'd say neither of you are favored. It's a real grind. It's a real back and forward. Just trying to get the max out of your turn cycle, trying not to get decked out. They're trying to not take too much health loss because otherwise you can kill them with the dominates. And yeah.
Have you played Arachne at all? Because
I have not.
Okay, it's interesting. Okay. What about the Guardian? So we'll start with Oldhim. Where do you think Oldhim sits on the matchup tier?
It depends on the build because Oldhim can tech very differently. It's like if Oldhim wants to beat your deck, they can.
Yeah.
It just depends how many slots they want to allocate for it.
Yeah.
But I'd say versus kind of a generic, kind of the standard Oldhim decks that we have been seeing, I'd say it's a good matchup. You're actually favored. It's difficult to play.
Okay.
You need to be very patient, but kind of once you know how to crack Oldhim and you start to get confident in the deck, in yourself, and in how the game plays out, it's actually favored.
All right. I wouldn't have expected that. That's crazy. What about his less icy brother?
Bravo is even easier than Oldhim. I'd put Oldhim in like good to 50-50. Like Oldhim can be in the bad category depending. It's very
if he tacked for you
dependent.
Or not.
Yeah. But Bravo is worse at fatiguing you. So if you bring in the full stack or close to it, minus 1 or 2 cards that are bad in the matchup, it's going to be hard for them to fatigue you. You'll have enough damage to push through. They don't have a ton of D-reacts. They don't have the Oldhim's defensive capability. So they have to try and race you, essentially. Okay. They have to try and trade with you. And the only way they win that is by chaining, those big turns back to back. Yeah. If they get a crippling pummel into crippling, or, they get some nasty CNC pummels.
Pummel, CNC, crippling, yeah.
Like you can lose to Bravo. Yeah. He had some scary turns. But if he's not drawing above average and you're playing well, I think you win almost every time.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody can lose to Bravo, like you said. Most of the time I beat Bravos, but then every once in a while it's like, wow, you had every right card in a row, Yeah. Okay. What about the ninjas? We'll start with Phi.
Good. When I was testing this, I didn't lose to a Phi for like 3 weeks.
Okay.
Then a couple losses, but the deck is very favored versus any aggro deck because they can't block you very well. They get hit very hard by your disruption, and you are so consistent because you're all red, all your cards do the same thing pretty much. Just every hand you draw is good, and then it's like they might get ahead on one turn, but then you play Codex.
Yeah, catch right back up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you say Katsu's about the same?
I think Katsu is better versus you than a traditional aggro deck, because Katsu has a more potential to just like win. They just set up a huge combo and just it's like you can block out, but if they have the Razor, if they have the react, and then they have the right chaining, it's like they can kill you, and that actually happens more often than Phi beats you. Because Phi is very consistent, which means if their consistent game plan isn't enough, there's not much they can do.
Yeah.
But Katsu can try and high roll you. You know,
Yeah.
Ketsu can play for the huge turns.
Makes sense. Would you put him in like good but not that great, or would you put him in the skill?
Probably, I mean, I'd say you're favored, but we'll put him in the skill because I'm going to say that Uzuri's favored into a lot of decks.
Yeah. Okay. What about Azalea?
This one goes in skill. This is like, I think you are favored, but it is really, the decks are both powerful. They both have powerful on hits. They both have dominate. They have ways to kill you at the end of the game. You're both running D-Rex versus one another. It's, you know, you prefer to play on the kind of 2-card turns. They prefer to play on the 5-card, 4-card turns. Whoever wins is whoever can force the other one to play to their game plan. But yeah, I do think that you're favored in the, I call it the mirror, the Azalea Uzuri mirror.
Yeah.
Because they both occupy the same slot in the meta.
Okay. What about Lexi? A lot of people are struggling with Lexi right now.
Depends on the build.
Okay.
I think the kind of fuseless huge turn Lexi is favored versus you.
Okay.
But the more mid-range versions of Lexi, like the one that top 8 to calling Auckland, you're better versus them because they're playing more on your pattern, and you know it's more comfortable for Uzuri to play there. But I'd put Uzuri in. We'll put her in bed. She's got ice that can upset you sometimes when they just reveal an ice card, and then it's like, oh damn, now my turn's way shitter.
Yeah.
And they can have some very large turns, but they still have the Ranger problem of dying to your 6 copies of CNC.
Yeah, that's hard to deal with. What do you think about Bolton?
Haven't tested much versus them, to be honest. Don't see many,
but
I think it's definitely favored because they need their arsenal to combo you.
Yeah, I'd say Dory 2 kind of feels like you're doing the same thing, but yours is a little bit easier to pull off.
Yeah. Dory can beat you by fatigue, but if you sideboard in like 68 cards, because you just chuck in all the shreds, all the D-Reacts, you know, then you have enough to get through, even if they're fatiguing you. You're just a bit better. They're pushing raw damage with their weapon. You're pushing on hits.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would you say Kano's just a wash with this version?
Kano's a bad matchup.
Yeah. Okay. And then I'm assuming Leviah is an easy matchup because they implode if you rip away their ability to do Blood Debt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm sorry.
You have too many ways to ruin their plan, and Levia struggles with that. Yeah.
Sorry, all my Levia players. It's rough out there. What do you think about Reinhardt?
Skill.
We got one decent matchup, you guys.
This is, you know, you're both mid-range decks.
Yeah.
You're both trying to do similar things. Reinhardt a lot better at pushing damage. Uzuri a lot better at disruption.
Yeah.
It's just a back and forward. You trade hands with one another. Sometimes Reinhardt blood rushes and you lose because Reinhardt's very powerful sometimes. Sometimes you get through the CNC when they have a card that they wanted to play in Arsenal, and
it's true.
Then their turn sucks.
Yeah. And Codex is like not that great into Reinhardt. I mean, it still does all the same stuff, but like I get my swing big back, which isn't that big of a deal for me, you know?
Codex is good into everyone.
I mean, yeah, okay, yes. But it's not the same overwhelming power that it is, in my opinion, into other decks, because like I'll stick swing big in Arsenal, I'll throw my entire hand at you. I don't care about the frailty token, and now I have a swing big. And you know, you did 6, I get 8. So it's like it doesn't feel as annoying as like other decks because like you said, he's mid-range. So he doesn't really mind just being like, fine, take my whole hand, whatever, you know. But
yeah,
you could always destroy my Blood Rush and then I cry. Oh. Okay, what about the Ice Queen? because she's a staple of our meta still, right?
Yeah, this one I'd put in the skill section.
Okay.
You're both very vulnerable to one another. I'd describe it as a 40-40 matchup. Both of you lose to each other.
Interesting. Okay.
Neither of you are favored. Icelander sucks versus Uzuri, and Uzuri sucks versus Icelander.
That's crazy. Yeah, because Channel Lake Fridge, it's probably basically impossible to deal with as Uzuri.
It's not. Yeah, it's pretty rough.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Like you have to pay for your attack reaction, right?
Yes.
So yeah, you're paying for the 3, then you're paying for your attack reaction. Ugh, that's yucky.
So the thing is it's still you save 1 yellow, and it like you can still play your 1 attack, and then they ice react you, and then you can't play your Uzuri ability. But if you draw a blue on the turn on the turn after they channel you,
it can work out.
Then you're good. So the thing with Channel Lake is because you're always saving a yellow or a blue in your hand every time you can, and you swing an attack first, is the turn they channel you, it almost never ruins your turn. Because one of those resources was going to go into AB, and if you play your attack first, then now your attack react will cost 2 extra, but you've allocated 2 extra resources usually.
That's why you don't dagger, right?
Yeah.
Such good insights there. That's crazy. Okay.
But yeah, it's a tough matchup. You're both weak to disruption.
Yeah, Icelander is very fragile, especially with the Bullwinder build, right? Like that is built on the tightest curve of all time. Like Frostbites are pretty hard to deal with, which is why she does lose to Lexi sometimes, right? Couple Frostbites and Icelander's whole game plan goes away. Like inertia tokens, on hit, CNC.
A couple inertias and their whole game plan is ruined.
What about Dromai? I'm assuming this is a bad matchup.
Yeah. Dromai is a bad matchup.
Is it your worst matchup?
Kano's the worst matchup. So I'd put Lex. Yeah, I'd put Lexi as kind of the best of the bad matchups.
Okay.
That's like you're on a 45% win rate maybe versus Lexi. With Dromai, you're on like a 20.
Oof. 30. That's a bad matchup. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm working on it though. We're still trying to crack the Dromai matchup.
Yes.
I'm still brewing, trying things out. But
okay. What about Briar?
Briar's good.
Okay.
Briar can kill you with a crazy channel mount turn, but if they don't do that, your game plan is just very solid. They try and aggro you, you block, you swing, and it's tough for them.
So it's kind of same thing for Viscerai?
Viscerai is actually better versus you because they're split damage. And that means that, on their turns where they come in for like 8 arcane off, read the runes or revel in rune blood or, it can be a little tough for you because suddenly your hand that would have blocked well into your good turn doesn't do anything. Instead of blocking 3, your cards pitch for 1. Yeah. So Viscerai is a bit tougher than the other aggro decks.
Same thing for Rhinar. It's just so hard to deal with it. Like the split damage is just too difficult to effectively use your cards,
Yeah.
And then second to last, we're missing Riptide in this little queue, but I'm assuming the matchup is absolutely favored in a Riptide. But what about Dash?
Dash I'd put in good.
Okay.
Because they usually will pistol versus you. Because the idea is they set up pistol, they get all their items out, and then they win. And Assassin can't kill them before that happens. But in practice, you have quite a lot of ways to actually use your hand. You have a ton of shreds to get through their D-reacts. You can get them quite low while they're trying to set up items. And then you can tank a full item turn once or twice and keep pushing damage. And you're very good at finishing them. Okay. And that's forcing every card you force out of their hand kind of late game is they can't pistol you. And if they go aggro versus you, your deck is naturally favored versus aggro.
Yeah, every card blocks 3, basically. Okay, you have all the D-reacts. Totally makes sense. And then Riptide, I guess, is the final hero. Do you crush him?
I'm not going to say, because we haven't seen a good Riptide deck. We haven't seen,
True.
People would have said they crushed Uzuri, and then this deck beat them. So,
That's true.
I'm waiting for that Riptide deck that destroys the meta.
That surprises everybody, right? The Riptide seen around the world.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this all makes sense. It's a pretty good matchup spread, right? Like, if you're confident in this, it's Dromai being the most played hero in the game on average is kind of rough. So it's probably where you'd want to be putting a lot of your attention as an Uzuri player. And then obviously Lexi right now, a very high played player or hero as well. But aside from that, like if you're looking at a majority skill and favored matchup, especially into some of the biggest players in the field, like this is pretty good. This is a nice matchup spread. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the platform, man. Like I can't believe the story you told in the beginning was nuts to me. The fact that you cracked this deck before Outsiders came out is kind of insane. You've clearly played this thing a lot. You've thought about it a lot. And now you have a pretty intrinsic testing circle, right? Like going on with this deck. So I can't wait to see version 2. Are you going to be at Pro Tour at all playing this? Or is anybody in your circle playing this deck at Pro Tour?
I haven't been playing this game that long, so I don't have any PDIs yet, but I'm working on that. I'll try and get one.
I'm gonna see you. Big things, man. Road to Nationals season's coming up. I'm gonna see your name on the top of that list with this deck, right?
Yeah, hopefully. I'm hoping that we'll see some Uzuri in Pro Tour though.
Yeah,
I'm hoping.
I'm looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'll put all of his information down in the description below. It was a real pleasure having you on the channel. You're a really cool guy, man. I hope that we can talk in the future, and I'm going to be piloting this Uzuri deck right now as my second choice for Pro Tour behind Rhinar, because Rhinar's looking pretty bad. So I'm looking for that hero. So it might be me there playing your version of this deck, which I'm going to be bouncing a lot of ideas off you in the next couple weeks, I'm sure. But,
nice. Sounds good.
Thanks again, man. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you around.